Hello, everybody. This is Silver to Bronze, and I'm Tony, and I'm here with my co-host, Scott.
Hello, everybody.
How are you doing, Scott?
I'm fine, and I need to ask you how you are, particularly how your arm is doing.
Yeah, it's hurting a little bit.
Is it from all the twisting I gave you so that we could do this week's topic?
Yeah, you almost broke my arm, man.
Yeah, put some ice on it, rub some dirt on it.
Do they go with the joke well enough?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll work.
Scott did not have to twist my arm to do this topic today. But we'll tell him in a minute what that is.
Okay.
I for some reason, I feel compelled to ask, how are you doing? Because every week I do say, hey, Scott, how are you doing? And I know how you're doing, but I haven't seen you this week, and I didn't see you today. I mean, I saw you off in the distance, but we didn't work together
doing
today.
Just fine.
Yeah. Okay. Well, and this weekend is Mother's Day, and you're going to take Mom to go see Thunderbolts, I think.
Yeah, Mom wants to see Thunderbolts.
Is she getting excited?
And so do I.
Yeah. Are you guys getting excited? It's getting good reviews.
I certainly am. It is getting very good reviews, and it's getting good reviews from what I would consider the general public as opposed to just the hardcore Marvel fan base.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I was really excited about it, but briefly, and now I'm just back where I am with Marvel movies in general, which is I'll wait.
Yeah.
But I won't be waiting for the Fantastic Four. I will go see that.
And I have just literally had my head stuck in the sand as much as possible because I got word that there is a Fantastic Four, the post-credits scene that Marvel is so famous for, that one of them is a little bit of a hint about Fantastic Four. So I have avoided seeing it or hearing what it is. I only know that it exists because I don't want to be spoiled.
Okay. Man, you're
I like
hardcore.
The surprise. I love the surprise.
Yeah. Well, do you want to just tell everybody what our topic is for today? This is a big one, as always. We just keep getting more and more big topics, it seems.
Well, it's a big topic about a very small thing. It's really really small.
As small as you can get, and smaller than Ant-Man.
Smaller. It's so small it doesn't even exist in this universe.
And what would that be?
It would be the Micronauts.
The Micronauts, yeah.
Yes, one of Marvel's many licensed properties they were very fond of in the late 70s and early 80s.
And people, again, you guys can't see it, but Scott, he's smiling, right? You're smiling with your eyes the entire time. Like you're excited about this. You love the Micronauts. I
love the Micronauts. Honestly, I have been dying to do this topic since we started this podcast. This is like, when are we going to do Micronauts? When are we going to do Micronauts?
That is true, yeah.
And honestly, this week, it came down to kind of a coin toss of whether we were going to do Micronauts or whether we were going to do ROM.
Yeah.
Because we're both big, huge ROM fans. And we kind of decided that since ROM has a bigger story overall that runs for longer, so we thought that would be something we needed to do a little more research and catching up on. Whereas the start of the Micronauts has a kind of a self-contained story arc that runs through the first 12 or 13 issues with a pretty cut-and-dried ending, so we thought we'd focus on that.
Yeah, and I am a fan of both of them, and you're right, and I want to say that I'm a big fan of ROM, but the truth is I only read so many. I only have like a handful of each. But I did love what I had, though. So.
Oh, yeah. I read the entire run of ROM when it came out the first time.
Well, what about Micronauts?
Oh, same.
Okay,
same.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were mainstays of mine through till the end.
And I'm sure a lot of listeners know, but you can't get on Marvel Unlimited and read either one of those titles. You can't read Micronauts, and you have to do what I did, which was have you loan me all 12 issues, right?
Yeah.
I'm kind of joking. I didn't do that. You did do that for me, though.
I did, again, everything but twist your arm to get you to take mine home.
I was so afraid of touching them. Like if something bad happened to me, I would just die. I just absolutely died. But instead, I found them in the dark corners of the web and read them that way.
There are places, easy places where you can read all of these in just your typical web browser. It doesn't require anything underhanded or unsafe. But you are correct, and a lot of it has to do with these licensed properties.
Has everything to do with the licensed
Marvel
properties.
Comics gets a license from these toy manufacturers, and basically it's up for a set number of years.
And is this like 1977?
Issue number 1 came out in 79.
79, but
so they
maybe
probably,
I'm just thinking like when Mantlo read, or didn't read, never mind, when he got the idea of doing the Micronauts. But anyway, it doesn't matter, you're right, it's 1979.
Yeah, well, the legend goes that his son, or a young son of his, got some of these Micronauts for Christmas, and he was so fascinated with them that it was like, man, I could write a story around these guys. And went to Jim Shooter, and Shooter said fine, and next thing you know, they had a contract inked.
Yeah, that's great. It really is.
Well, and it was not the only one that that was running at the time, because with the boom of Star Wars, sci-fi toys were quite popular, and Marvel had the Micronauts. They were running a series called Shogun Warriors. And of course, ROM came along right in there very shortly afterwards. So they were kind of in that mode and getting all the properties that they could. But a decade later, those rights run out, and then suddenly they can't publish these comics on Marvel Unlimited, or use those characters in other Marvel titles.
Yeah, and I read something interesting yesterday. Like, of course, this is how this would work. Marvel characters from around other magazines could come into Micronauts,
yes,
but Micronauts could not go out and be in their titles.
Right.
And that would just complicate things so much, right?
Although later that kind of became, once the rights were lost, and then that's something we can maybe touch on a little bit later, some of the characters in this comic book are actual original Marvel creations of Bill Mantlo's, whereas all the others are very closely based on the toys themselves.
Is it Captain Universe, for instance?
Captain Universe is a solely Marvel creation, but so were the main 2 characters of the comic, who we'll talk to in a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Are they?
Yeah. And once the rights to Micronauts ran out, those characters were still appearing in some other Marvel comics, just not mentioning the name Micronauts.
Right, right. And so I can guess.
They found a way to work around it.
Yeah. How did you want to start? I'm just interested in the whole toy thing.
Well,
I had memories that I have not thought about in 40 plus years just hit me in the head this week.
Yeah. Well, the honest truth is the Micronauts are what got me back into comics. When I was a youngster, when I was reading, a lot of the late Silver and early Bronze Age titles that we've discussed, I've often, talked to the listeners about how, I'd get my 75 cents allowance, and when we went to the grocery store, I'd get my comic books and that sort of thing. That period had kind of ended for me. As I got a little bit older, I was scraping for money, and there were places that would buy comic books, and I just kind of was like, well, you know what, I'm kind of done with this, and I sold all my comics for what by now would probably be considered an insanely small amount of money. But I still was a big sci-fi geek, and one Christmas, the year before, I received a bunch of Micronaut toys and absolutely loved them. Thought they were the coolest things ever. Spaceships and figures and everything was all interchangeable. So one day I was just walking through the drugstore and happened to glance over at the spinner rack, and I saw Micronauts number 2, and my head exploded. And I was like, I have to have this. And grabbed it immediately, bought it, started reading it regularly. Shogun Warriors, I was also reading that. ROM came along before too long, and I was reading all those.
Did you have a ROM, by the way?
I did not have an actual ROM toy. Back in the day, ROM was actually pretty expensive.
Was it?
Yeah, he was a big electronic toy and cost a bit more than I could scrape together.
I can believe that.
And then what ended up happening as I was going back to the spinner rack every month to get ROM and Micronauts and whatnot, it was like, oh, hey, there's the Amazing Spider-Man. I wonder what he's up to these days. Oh, look, there's the new Fantastic Four. And the next thing you know, I'm kind of into my second age of comics, and that's where I hit the ground running, because I had my own transportation, I had a job, I could afford to go back and get back issues. And so when I talk about at one point having a large collection of, old and key issues, they all came about because I ran across Micronauts number 2 on the spinner rack.
Yeah, so you owe them a bit of debt.
I do.
We all do. Because we wouldn't have you here right now.
Well, and that's absolutely proof positive to the brains at Marvel that those tie-ins worked, because they reeled me back in, and before long, within a year or two of that, I was buying all the mainstream Marvel titles again, because they reeled me in with something I recognized. And that's why sometimes those licensed properties can really be worth it.
No, that's really too fun. I don't want to keep harping on the toys, but I do like the idea of the toys. I wasn't into them at all. Like, I don't know why. I think I've said this before. I didn't like toys like that for some reason, and so it just didn't appeal to me at all. But I did have this kid I knew. I would go to his house, and his brother had some Micronauts, and we would play, and we'd do something with them and whatnot. And I remember, I don't remember the smaller Micronauts, but I remember, I always forget how to pronounce everybody's name. There's Karzar. Is it Karzar?
Baron Karza.
Karza, rather.
Yeah.
And I remember even how he feels. He was was he a well-made toy? In my mind, he was heavy.
Heavy and solid.
Yeah, and you could pull, magnetic, everything came apart.
Yes, all of the joints were magnetic ball joints, which meant you could take the arms off, you could reattach them in other places. He had a horse that he could turn into a centaur with, and all of those properties of the toy were actually integrated into the characters of the comics.
Yeah. Matter of fact, there's times where I'm like, this is a toy. They're not trying to sell you. I think the comic did really well in not trying to sell you a toy, but there's moments where it's like, oh, we need to have these wings pop out and have these guys fly, because that's what the Micronauts, the toy, does. Or you would see this not so well made looking helicopter thing that, why is this helicopter in this story? But it's because it's one of the toys. And I bet you anything. And then I did go and look to see what all these toys look like.
Yeah.
And did you have a whole big set? There's one that's a big box, and it has all of them in it.
I didn't have a lot. When they first came out, there was a main core set that was a set called, there was one called the Time Traveler, Space Glider, Biotron, Baron Karza, Galactic Defender, and they were kind of the first handful. And I had those, and I picked up a few later, but I never had just hundreds of them. And I never had any of the really big ships or anything like that, because they were awfully expensive as well.
I believe that, because they had to have been pretty large.
Yeah, some of the figures were at least 12 inches tall.
The Karza, and who's the white?
Force Commander,
same size. Those are the only two that I knew that were that size.
And they were kind of a mid-size.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about it, and I realize that
this
still doesn't have it, is that one of the reasons that all of these toys came out at the same time, and one of the reasons that they beat the Star Wars figures to the punch, was because these were already existing toys in Japan. They were from a line of toys called Microman, and when science fiction became a big property again, Star Wars was out, but the figures hadn't quite dropped yet, but sci-fi was the new big thing, and toy companies started looking for properties that they could start manufacturing and license as quickly as possible thereby avoiding all the lead time. So some of these Micronauts characters are from different toy lines in Japan, but Mego, the company that produced them, just bought up all the properties and all the rights and slapped Micronauts on everything and shipped them out the door and let the kids figure out how they work together.
It kind of, looking at the toys online, I can kind of believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're kind of disparate.
It's not streamlined looking. Yeah. And you mentioned how you're just mentioning Star Wars. There's no way that you can't compare these two. You have to compare this comic to Star Wars.
Oh, it definitely has. It's definitely, as almost every science fiction property did, it was cashing in on the success of Star Wars.
I read later, and I don't remember what my first issue was, but it's a lot later, like in the 20s. So I didn't read these early ones. But so I'm thinking, like, what would I have thought at that time?
Mm-hmm.
I would have loved to have this story because it has a lot of the same storyline as Star Wars in a way. It certainly has a Darth Vader character in it, a Han Solo, Princess Leia situation, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
And if you recall, like, Star Wars came out in 77,
Mm-hmm.
so, and we're all just waiting for the next Star Wars movie. I mean, that's all anyone's waiting for, movie-wise, right? And we're just dying for more Star Wars. So I would have loved anything that would have been like Star Wars, just to scratch that itch until finally the other movie came
Yes,
out, right?
absolutely.
Yeah, so this would have been welcomed. I would not have criticized them for so blatantly, like, thank you for writing this for us because we need it.
Well, and I think even though the concept of a grand space opera with, larger than life villains and mysterious forces and that sort of thing is a common theme, and I think that there is definitely some overlap. I wouldn't go so far as to say that the Micronauts just completely tread all over it. It was better than definitely cast in the mold of, but not just a complete rip-off.
Oh, no,
So
I hope
that
I didn't imply
oh,
that. Okay.
No, not
and
at all.
That's what I really like about this whole magazine, is that it does a wonderful job of creating this whole universe. It's just so awesome. It's so open-ended. There's so much you can do with it.
Well, it's very open-ended, and the writer, Bill Mantlo, just had a genius stroke of world building. Because,
he did. I thought he did a great job
all of this
with this.
None of this world that these characters came to inhabit had anything to do with the toys. There was no outline of, who's the good guys, who's the bad guys, who works for who. None of that existed. And by virtue of this first story that we're talking about, running over 12, 13 issues of a comic, it actually has a lot more room to breathe and a lot more things to explore than a 2-hour movie that has although excellent, the original Star Wars has a very basic premise. Buck Rogers, good guys, bad guys, spaceships, a little bit of mysticism, but not a lot of depth. So the Micronauts got to run with that a little bit.
You're braver than me to be able to say those things. I feel like people will give you hate mail or something. I'm joking.
No. Well, at the time, when the first Star Wars came out, nobody knew that it was going to be the big hit that it was, including George Lucas.
Yeah.
So it hadn't occurred to them quite yet that even though he might have had some of these ideas rolling around in the back of his head, he needed to just kick the door open first and say, here's Star Wars. Isn't this great? Then once the popularity and the money started rolling in, we can expand on some of these things a little bit.
It was an exciting time, and I think that this would have would have folded just perfectly right into the whole kind of culture of what kids wanted or what people wanted at that time.
It definitely did, and I think what you'll find is I'm not alone with my rampant enthusiasm and rose-colored glasses nostalgia for this. There are a lot of people that are my age that when you ask them what some of their favorite comics from the early 80s are, They'll tell you the Micronauts.
I feel like I ran across something just today on Blue Sky about that, and not too long ago on Reddit. I got the sense that you're exactly right about this. People feel pretty strongly that they really like this title.
Well, the story and the comic far exceeded the potential of the toys, and indeed ran as a comic for years after the toys had long been since discontinued.
Yeah.
The comic outlived the toys by years.
Yeah, it only ran for like 6 years. Not only, it ran for like 6 years or something.
I think the first series ran 60 issues.
Yeah.
And then there was a second series, and there have been a smattering of reboots by other publishers since.
They made a great omnibus with this, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that they wouldn't have done that. They
No.
couldn't have done that had this not been something that was going to be a slam dunk
Right.
received from everybody. And I
Right.
think that omnibus got a pretty good review.
I'm sure it did too. And maybe just a year or so ago, they released a Michael Golden Artists Edition that recollected the original artwork from the first handful of issues, where they reproduced the pages exactly as they were drawn with the writing and everything on them, so that you can actually see the artist's work. And I really, really, really wanted that. But it was the book is actually published at the size of the original comic pages, and it's a hardback. So
Oh
I
my
think,
gosh.
yeah, at this point, I think you can kind of guess what the price on that might have been.
I couldn't because I can't buy things that expensive.
Yeah, it was way too expensive for me.
Oh,
so
that's crazy.
But it was a beautiful book.
And you know what? That's another thing everybody harps about, and for good reason. What's his name? What's the artist?
Michael Golden.
Golden. He's not the best artist in the world, in my opinion, but man, it really fits this. It fits this. It's hard to imagine. There is actually someone I like better than him in this sense, but man, it really fits, doesn't it?
It does fit very
They
much.
found the perfect artist for this.
I believe so too, and I think that he brought. I think a lot of that. He brought a lot of the nostalgia and enthusiasm that everyone has for this comic is in the artwork as well, because at the time it really didn't look like anything else.
It didn't.
Michael Golden has a very unique style. It's a little bit of Kirby, kind of a little bit of Byrne, a little bit of Gene Colan, all rolled up into one, and the results are very striking, because when things are dark and moody, he draws out the shadows and the heavy inks like Gene Colan used to do. But when the good guy and the bad guy, are having an all-out armored battle, it looks like the best panels of Jack Kirby that you can imagine, right down to the Kirby crackle.
Yeah, well, matter of fact, I think I read somewhere that he was encouraged to draw like Kirby, but that was still, I can't believe that was still happening in 1979. That would happen with other artists earlier. He gave it his best go.
Yeah.
But it's clearly him, though.
It is.
Yeah.
Even when he's channeling Kirby, there's no mistaking the style of the characters for anything other than him.
You know, he's just not lazy. Again, there's times where I'm just shocked that an artist will just draw the most boring thing. Like, does it really take more energy to draw something interesting than it does boring, you know? And every panel has like explosions or movement, or I don't know, not necessarily even movement, but just that it's exciting. You just kind of, your eye just wants to capture the whole page at once.
Every page is very energetic.
There's times that it's a lot, like it's overstimulating sometimes. Yeah.
And he has throughout this book, has a very unique use of color, into the point that at sometimes when figures are drawn, perhaps there's points where some of the characters are like projecting themselves out of their bodies and that sort of thing. You'll see the normally drawn character with a shadowed image behind them of that character that might be only cyan or only magenta.
Right.
And it's like these trippy colors. And I've always thought that, if I got a pair of those old 3D glasses that have like the red and the blue lenses on them and looked at it, it would probably jump right off the page at you.
It's a really fun title.
To kind of go full circle into the characters themselves and the storyline, it's kind of got a Star Wars feel to it, but it's also kind of got a Guardians of the Galaxy ragtag group of misfits kind of thrown together by circumstance to, into something that they didn't quite plan for, but now the galaxy hangs in the balance, and so they've got to work together and, save the day. In fact, a couple of those characters that we said that were actual Marvel creations, I do believe may have put in a couple appearances in the modern-day Guardians of the Galaxy comics.
I feel like one for sure did, yeah.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about how serious or not serious this line of comics take. Like it's not like Nova, which isn't very serious at all in some ways. But it's hardly like, it's not Spider-Man at this point in time either. It's like where it's pretty edgy and dark sometimes. It's Star Wars-ish in that it is this grand opera and it's fun, but yet in the background the story is really dismal and I don't know why I can't pronounce, or why I keep forgetting the guy's name. Karza. Write that down. Karza. I only read 12 comics total. He's the epitome of evil, right?
He is, and there is a bit of almost, I would call, gothic horror to this, and in some of the things that he does, which we'll kind of touch on here in a bit. But even though, you talk about Spider-Man, there's not a lot of personal tragedy and deep, dark, emotional carryings on in the main characters, but the overall story has a few darker moments that I would say maybe a little bit more Empire Strikes Back than Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly. Do you think you have to read the whole first year to kind of even really get who everybody is?
I would say you probably wouldn't have to, but I would recommend it, and you'll definitely enjoy everything that comes along more by knowing where some of these characters, what they've already been through.
I don't know who Ran is. I don't know who Mari is, like on a personal level, like I would Peter Parker or somebody.
Right. I
kind of do want to know these people that much, but at the same time, I don't know if you can do it. And
the first issue to, I guess this would be a good point where we just start in with some of the storyline. The first issue throws you in cold.
Matter of fact, I'm like, what the heck's going on?
Yeah, it literally starts off in the middle of a battle on Homeworld, which is kind of the central world of this place that's called the Microverse, and it just throws you in the middle of an insurrection. People on horseback are running for their lives from these forces of Baron Karza, because Baron Karza has essentially finalized his takeover of Homeworld by staging a coup and routing out the last of what is referred to as the royal family, which would be the normal, benevolent ruling family of Homeworld. And you don't know who any of these people are, only that they're running for their lives and the bad guys are hot on their heels.
See, I'm not even sure I was really completely sure who was the good guys or bad guys right off the bat.
Yeah.
So it took me, I'm embarrassed to say, it took me a little while to center myself and understand what was going on. I don't know how long it took, but...
Well, and, when it throws you in like that, you don't necessarily automatically assume that the people that are being chased are running for their lives, or are running because they've done something wrong, are in the process of being apprehended. But what starts off with is a character called Princess Mari and her brother Argon, who are the last surviving members of the royal family. And to solidify his power, Baron Karza, who has been around for a very long time, although that's not revealed for a bit yet, has decided to capture them and kill them, and thereby solidify his power over Homeworld completely. because the royal family has a small group that is still loyal to them. But overall, the population of Homeworld has kind of sided with Baron Karza, because with his science, he has developed a technology, although it's almost kind of a technology slash sorcery, that allows him to extend life, transform bodies, transform figures, plant old people's minds in young, fresh bodies through this place that he calls the body banks. And the rich upper class are pretty much guaranteed eternal life, so they have put their lot in with him, and the rank and file rabble of the streets are occasionally harvested for parts, which is kind of that gothic part that I was thinking about. And if you're on Karza's good side and you obey him properly, he'll go pick you out a new body off the street and transplant your brain into it, and they want that. The population of Homeworld has, for the most part, sided with Karza.
Yeah, I think even the general population, isn't there a lottery or something?
Yes, in order to keep people, hopeful and enthusiastic, they basically say, if you take your chances and you work hard and you do the things that you're expected to do, at random we'll select some people and you might get in with your immortality as well. Whether that ever happens or not is never completely shown. I tend to think maybe it didn't. It was the carrot at the end. It was the carrot to keep.
I believe a population would do that.
Yeah, it's not that hard It's not that hard. But Karza has actually, and in proof, Karza himself has actually been around for over 1,000 years.
Right.
He's over 1,000 years old, and he is living proof that this technology, for good or for evil, actually does work. So he has kind of just become this despotic ruler of Homeworld, and he does not want no rebellion at all to deal with, and that's what these last remnants of the royal family are doing. So he has decided, this is it, we're annihilating them.
Why is there all this uprising at this time? Do we know?
I don't.
It's right on it's right up to the day that somebody's returning home, right?
It is, and although I think that's almost kind of a coincidence, but I think that we come into this point now where Karza's power has solidified to a point where he can just simply eliminate these last remnants of the royal family, and there won't even be any outcry. The resistance that's left isn't strong enough to oppose him in any meaningful way, so this is where he wipes the slate clean. But as you mentioned, almost kind of in an unrelated fashion, you just do a jump cut, and here's a ship.
The Millennium Falcon.
Well, no. It's actually a ship called the Endeavor. And it is landing on Homeworld, and inside is the main character of our series, a fellow named Arcturus Ran, or Ran, depending upon how you want to pronounce that, who has been on a space flight for 1,000 years. The Endeavor left Homeworld 1,000 years ago, and his mission was to explore the galaxy, to make contact with other planets and other races, and he was in suspended animation this entire time, but he has a telepathic link with his robot pilot, who is called Biotron.
Who's clearly, this is one of the toys.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and the character of Ran is based on the figure of Space Glider.
And this is the only time that he will ever be referred to as Space Glider, I think.
Yeah.
They dropped that right away.
Yeah, they do. But this ship lands, and he thinks, oh, wow, look, all the soldiers are there. They're here to give us a royal welcome. And he walks down the ramp, and they open fire, and they drop him where he stands. And the next thing you know, they're basically dragging him off by his boots, and he lands in the dungeon. And in typical fashion, the Baron Karza collects up his political foes and he throws them in the dungeon. And as any good despot would, there are some Colosseum games and that sort of thing. The circus is part of bread and circuses. And he throws the commander and some new characters that we're going to meet, a fellow named Acroyer, who is from he's named Acroyer, but he is also from the race of Acroyers.
And if you're me, it's Acroyer.
Honestly, anybody that wants to correct me on these pronunciations, by all means, do so.
I think everybody would agree how you're pronouncing them is how it is to be pronounced.
All I know is these were how I pronounced them in my head when I read them in the comics.
I think you're right on. Yeah.
At the time, there wasn't any other there was no spoken. It wasn't like a movie or a TV show where I could learn how these things were pronounced. I just kind of made it up on the fly.
I think you're right. You're right.
But he encounters Acroyer, who is the disposed ruler of the race of Acroyers, and a fellow named Bug, who is essentially kind of like a humanoid insect character.
A little bit of a grasshopper-ish feel.
Kind of a grasshopper. Talks with a kind of a click in his voice every once in a while.
He has a tick. Yeah. In everything he says. Yeah.
Yeah, and basically they get thrown into the arena where they get to fight robots and other aliens and monsters for the entertainment of all. But what ends up happening is Princess Mary has escaped Baron Karza, and she has kind of gone incognito, kind of gone into hiding. And her brother has been captured. Karza has him. He's in the body banks. The rebels and Princess Mary break them out of the arena, and they load onto the Endeavor and hightail it out of there. And of course, Karza has ships in pursuit because Karza knows that there's something about Commander Ron that isn't quite adding up. He refers to him as kind of an X factor, an enigma. He's a wild card. Honestly, their escape was a bit engineered because Karza wanted to let them go because he wants them to lead him to whatever this enigma is that needs to reveal itself. And as they leave homeworld, what they don't know is Commander Ron and his ship can breach what is referred to as the space wall. And they leave the planet, they punch through the space wall and disappear, and all the pursuing ships smash into it like it's a brick wall. They're just literally obliterated.
Now, why was his ship able to do that?
Because he'd been there before. And over his 1,000-year trip, he had been all the way to this edge of this universe.
That's right.
And they had he and Biotron had modified the ship to go through this barrier, whereas the other ships had not. The downside of it is once they punch a hole, that hole stays open. So even though they have escaped for the moment, there will be forces pursuing them. And when they punch through the space wall, they appear on Earth. And the space wall is what separates the microverse from, we'll call it the macroverse, Earth 616, our universe, the Marvel universe. Once they've made that escape, they collect their breath for a second, they try to figure out what's going on, but they know that there'll be pursuers hot on their heels. They have, I wouldn't necessarily call them filler issues, but they have some adventures on Earth, and a lot of it is geared towards seeing figures that are the size of the toys.
Right.
Have space battles and combat on Earth. When they're walking through this yard, and they look up at this giant structure, and they're all awestruck. Like, what is this giant structure? Obviously, this was made by some intelligence. Maybe it's some religious significance. And of course, they pan back, and it's a swing set.
Yeah, it's just a boy's backyard.
Yeah,
but I want to point out that you were telling this long story about this whole comic, and it's almost convoluted. That is the first issue. It is just a lot.
It is dense. It is absolutely dense.
I mean, they're trying to tell quite a few stories. so many characters, and when you get done with this comic, you don't know what's happened to half of them. They're just they were there, and now they're not.
Yeah.
Of course, you understand it's going to come down the road, but they have set the stage for quite a few stories already.
Yes. And in fact, I think there was a bit of a criticism of the first couple of issues that the story was so dense that the editors were a little concerned that readers weren't going to be able to keep up, but obviously they did because the comic was very popular.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to take you off track of how you want to talk about all this, but what did you think about them going to Earth?
Oh, I loved it. I was excited. I knew, and of course, having my first issue that I saw, having been number 2.
Oh yeah, yours
starts off with all of the characters running through the grass and this giant looming figure behind them with a lawnmower.
Yeah.
As in, oh no, the Micronauts are going to get hit by a lawnmower and then the series ends. But
someone's
does
lawnmower
not.
is going to get destroyed.
Yes, it does.
It's sorry. I feel like I'm interrupting too much.
Oh no, not at all. Actually, honestly,
it's a lot of fun. I'm not a fan of them going to Earth at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know they have to, or else they're not. Well, I'm a little confused with how they're Micronauts from the beginning, and they don't know that they're the smaller. But whatever.
It's a little bit of a naming conceit. I will concede that because yes, they actually refer to the area that they inhabit as the microverse. So knowing that they're micro relative to what?
Well, they were shocked when they got there, and
Yeah.
like right away they were aware that they were small, or that things were very large, I should say. But I thought that was a little bit odd. Like, why couldn't another planet have just? It just looked like a jungle to me.
Yeah.
But anyway, the reason why I wasn't a big fan of it was I keep wanting to go back to Homeworld,
Right.
And that's my favorite place on this whole run. I just want to go back to where they were. I never cared for I shouldn't say never, but I just wasn't a fan when they were on Earth. It just wasn't that exciting to me.
Well,
and it's down in Florida.
And it is in Florida.
No offense to Florida, but I mean, like, it's not. They're not interacting with Earth 616. You're not even sure it's Earth 616
for a while.
But even then, I'm not sold.
Yeah. Well, they do have a series of adventures once they arrive on Earth because, of course, Baron Karza sends a force through the space wall after them,
right,
with the goal of you capture them and you bring them back. And the person leading this force is another Acroyer named Shaitan. And he is actually a Acroyer who is on our crew, his brother.
Right.
And they are not on speaking terms. In fact, they refer to a blood feud being between them because Acroyer is the rightful ruler of their home world, but he was deposed by Shaitan, who struck a deal with Karza. That's why the Acroyers, for the most part, work for Karza, even if it's a bit unwillingly. So the Acroyers from the toy line are cast as bad guys a little bit, and even though they kind of come around later, at the beginning, they're working for Karza. They come through the space wall. They have a few series of battles. Right in this boy's backyard, they encounter a boy named Steve Coffin, and he, of course, sees them as, this is great, and befriends them immediately.
I would assume this whole story, a kid could then go out in their backyard and just replay this whole thing in a sense, right?
Yeah, because because as they've come in, they're about the size of their toys now. But they have a series of what I'll call it space battles, but because backyard battle just doesn't sound as exciting. But eventually, they get the drop on Shaitan and the rest of their forces, and they're sent packing. They retreat back through the space wall, and the Micronauts are, for the moment, safe. And they have a few adventures on Earth. They encounter the Man-Thing of all characters. Well, they are. When you said set in Florida, they are in the Everglades, and that's where the Man-Thing lives. Even though it is not all that consequential.
Matter of fact, I didn't even understand the purpose of Man-Thing in this.
Man-Thing, I also believe, was starting a new series at the time.
Oh my gosh!
So I think that comic, let's kind of cross-promote a little bit. Let's put the Micronauts, the Man-Thing in Micronauts, and give its...
But this was like I don't know, maybe, I don't think I know who Man-Thing is really then. I mean, I have a couple, I might really just have one. So I don't know whether I'm a fan or not, but this did not turn me on to Man-Thing at all.
Well, Man-Thing is kind of Marvel's answer to DC's Swamp Thing. It is kind of a character, not quite a monster, certainly not an aggressive monster, but one that is drawn to emotions, and it's very empathic, but it's kind of just a monster of just muck and crud, kind of built out of the substance of the swamp itself.
And isn't the dangerous thing is if you fear, isn't that it's kind of over for you if you fear?
Yes,
around
because
him?
this monster being attracted to emotions and being highly empathic, when it senses fear, it dislikes it and kind of is aggressive, sort of aggressive towards it, which is kind of a catch-22 because it senses the fear, but it hates it. The more that it oppresses, the more fear that happens.
Right.
But if it gets a hold of you, essentially the slogan goes, whatever knows fear burns at the Man-Thing's touch. So I believe that may have even been in the title of the comic.
No, that sounds about right to me, because that's pretty much all I know. It just had no purpose. Correct me if I'm wrong. I really don't know why he was in this.
It was just a kind of a filler adventure to have.
No kidding.
It was,
yeah.
The Micronauts are on Earth now, so what's a character that we would like to get a little,
Man, yeah, I guess I'm being a little harsh, especially since you were kind enough. You gave me your copy of this.
You gotta admit, that's a great cover, though.
It is.
Oh, it's a great
right
cover.
There, that would, if someone said, well, we thought we could make a really pretty awesome cover with it. Okay, you convinced me, because that happened. That was a good cover. Yeah.
Well,
matter of fact, they're not really hurting for bad covers in this.
Oh, Michael Golden's covers.
Yeah.
Some of them are gorgeous.
Yeah,
absolutely gorgeous.
I think I like just about every one of them. Even like that second one, like you said, with the lawnmower coming down. It's pretty neat.
It is. It definitely creates a different perspective.
Yeah.
But partly too, while the Micronauts are having these battles and having these encounters, they're buying time because something is happening in the background. After these battles that they've had, Steve Coffin, his father, he goes and he shows them, and it's like, here is this blown up backyard, but look, the spaceship's got a little dead body in it. And they collect some of these dead bodies, and his father works for NASA, and he says, I think I know who we need to show these to. And they cart all this stuff off, and they take it to kind of a shady laboratory at
called
NASA, called Hell, and they show them to this professor who has the dramatic name of Prometheus.
Very much, yeah.
So if that tells you right there that probably he's not above board. But they show him these figures, and he actually recognizes them because he is aware of the existence of the microverse and has building this portal called the Prometheus Pit. He hopes that it is a portal to the microverse because he thinks that the microverse is rich in technology that he wants, because he's kind of got some cyborg parts and he wants to shed his human half altogether and become a complete cyborg. He thinks that technology exists in the microverse, which if he hooked up with Karza probably does.
How did they... I didn't catch on how they got... He had bodies already of other Micronauts prior to the ones they brought him that day. How did he obtain those?
I don't know, unless maybe those were ones that were found by others, because they'd kind of had this running battle going down the highways and every which way.
I got the impression he's been collecting them for some time.
Well, he may have. And if that's the case, they didn't necessarily explain that.
Yeah.
But perhaps through some of his experiments, maybe he had actually pulled some figures through the
and they
pit,
never lived.
And they didn't live. It's a fuzzy bit.
No, I didn't miss anything. Is what you're telling me.
You didn't miss anything, and it's a fuzzy question mark that isn't completely answered. what ends up happening is they have a battle at this laboratory, and Baron Karza once this portal is opened, Baron Karza is able to come through because he senses this, and he kind of does a body swap with this Professor Prometheus and essentially manifests himself on Earth, starts laying waste to the place. And while the Micronauts are fighting this professor's, he's got cyborgs and soldiers and that, the time travelers, who have been kind of this shadowy presence in the background, bestow some of their power on Steve Coffin's father, and he becomes a character called Captain Universe.
Yeah, he's a former NASA astronaut himself. But kind of they paint him as kind of a loser. His wife has died. He's kind of down on his luck. Yeah.
He's got a young teenage son. And
they don't necessarily get along right now. They're not fighting, but they're distant.
They're distant. He is kind of protective of his son because he thinks, he's had a lot of emotional problems with, as you mentioned, the death of his mother, his wife, that sort of thing.
And his career has gone not too well at this point.
He's kind of aged out.
Yeah.
He's an older man. He's not the prime right stuff candidate anymore. But in a nutshell, with the enigma, the time travelers bestowing this power to him, he becomes Captain Universe and is able to basically repel Karza. And they go, all of them, lock, stock, and barrel, the Micronauts, Karza, everybody says, this is our exit, let's get out of this Earth place, this is for the birds, let's get out of here.
Yeah.
And they all barrel into this pit of Prometheus and emerge back in the microverse. And that kind of puts a pin on the Earth adventures for the time being.
And now we have a nice little tube to travel back and forth in, right?
It continues to exist, although the time travelers, once they remove the Captain Universe powers from Captain Universe, say that the pit will be closed.
Oh, I didn't catch that. Okay.
Well, it comes back later, but for the moment, it's not a two-way street anymore. Everybody reappears in the microverse, and while Karza has been off planet, the rebellion says this is our opportunity to strike, and they really push the battle to Karza. They land right in the middle of a fleet of recruiters. A huge battle ensues. Long story short, Baron Karza gets the drop on them and captures Princess Mary and Commander Ron and hightails it back to Homeworld with them. And the couriers are just left to kind of sort things out. They have repelled his forces, Karza's forces and Karza's armies, but all Karza really wanted was Commander Ron, and anyway, so he's got what he wants. He's heading back to Homeworld. The couriers do mop-up patrol. They basically try to conquer the courier's homeworld, which is named Spartak.
It's a pretty cool planet, if you want to call it that.
It's a weird, spiky. It's the kind of planet that you can see would produce a race of the coldest and hardest warriors, because these people, they live in their armor. They're very dispassionate, very hard. They're very, very somber people. But the world of Spartak is actually, in a sense, kind of alive, because it has its own sentience. And,
that's right, yeah.
And part of the way that the Acroyers are able to defeat Baron Karza's forces is by our character Acroyer merges with this, and they call it the world mind. And once he does, the planet itself kind of comes alive in a way, and is just shooting rocks and opening chasms to swallow the troops and destroying starships and that sort of thing. And that's kind of how they're able to defeat Karza's forces.
See, this is why I like when they're in the microverse, because so much more exciting and interesting than flying down the highway of, near Daytona Beach.
And I would agree with that. This is the world building that everyone has grown to love. The adventures on Earth are fun, but the mythology of the Micronauts and these characters and how their mythology surpasses a line of toys in every way is taking place in the Microverse and at Homeworld. Michael Golden captures these epic space battles in a way that I don't think any other comic really has. Even the Star Wars comics didn't capture space battles as well as the Micronauts did.
I would agree with that. I didn't look at too many of the Star Wars when I was a kid, but not like this. Not that I recall.
But the epic space battle, Karza's forces for the most part are defeated by the Acroyers, but he's gone. He's left because once he captured Commander Ron, he's hightailing it back to Homeworld. And when he arrives at Homeworld, he finds that the rebellion, aided by the time travelers, has taken advantage of his absence and started a battle at the body banks. And they're damaged, they're in flames, and he is not happy. he is...
Well, no, it's 1,000 years worth of work down the drain.
Yes, right? And he is not happy in the slightest. But he says, okay, I'm back. You're going to have to deal with me personally now, and we're going to settle this. And the first person to step up to fight him is Mari's brother, Prince Argon, who has been converted into a centaur by Karza as part of just his experiments, just to basically, let's just see if I can do it. But he is wearing the ceremonial armor of his forefathers, his great who knows how many grandparents of Commander Ron's parents are Dallin and Sepsis Ron, who were kind of the original ruling family. And so he has donned this ceremonial armor, which bears a large resemblance to Karza's, except that it's stark white versus his stark black. And they have the fight of all fights. Karza transfers himself into a centaur, but he can basically switch back and forth at will. One of the things that his body banks has enabled him to do is he can detach body parts. If he wants to choke you from a distance, his hand shoots off and chokes you and flies back. Kind of like Darth Vader doing the Force choke, but just a little more up close and personal.
Yeah, exactly.
But he transforms himself, and so they fight it out in their centaur forms. And their fight is one of the most epic splash pages. That's one of them. I love
that page so much.
Oh my gosh, talk about somebody taking their Kirby pills that day.
Yeah.
That could have been Ben Grimm and Annihilus. That could have been any Fantastic Four episode. It would have totally looked at home. And these guys, they're so evenly matched that this battle really is drawn out. The narrator says, how long is it that they fight? For hours, for days? But even though Force Commander really gives Karza about all he can handle, he is still vanquished in the end. And Karza thinks, that's it, I'm done. I have beaten Force Commander. This nonsense rebellion of yours is finally done. And while he's monologuing, Commander Ron starts changing. He's transforming. And all of these priests that have supposedly been subservient to Karza in the past reveal themselves to be time travelers. And the time travelers are a manifestation of something that's referred to as the Enigma Force. The Enigma Force is what was given to Ray Coffin to make him Captain Universe. Well, now all of the time travelers there all together bestow that power to Commander Ron, and he becomes one of them. And in the second greatest splash page in the very same issue, Commander Ron reveals himself with the title of the issue, which is "We Are the Enigma Force." So all the time travelers have bestowed their power upon him, and said, this is it. All the cards are on the table now. It's your job to take him out. If you can't, it's over. This is the Hail Mary. And what ensues is probably one of the most cosmic battles that has ever been committed to page. And
I'm
know,
surprised it's not commented on more.
I am as well, because it is visually stunning. And of course, I'm going to, little, disclaimer here. I am so high on nostalgia and remembering this so fondly.
And I'm going to confirm with everybody, you are. No one can see your face right now. This whole time you've been talking today, you're just soaked in it. Yeah,
I am. And honestly, just the thought of recalling that page and that big reveal kind of gets me a little emotionally choked up. It's kind of like, all right, this is it. This is man, here's where this is where the rubber meets the road. And this battle, I talked about the crazy use of color and the use of ghostly like images of these characters as they fight, and the colors and the detail is just completely. It's Jack Kirby would be proud. He picked that up and he flipped through it and said, "Hey, this is pretty good."
Yeah.
They fight, and again, and Karza has just walloped Force Commander, and he's really still holding his own. Fighting Force Commander did not wear him down. So now that he's fighting Commander Ron, it's touch and go. We're not sure how this goes, because there are times when each of them are kind of on their heels a little bit. Ron thinks he's winning, then he gets knocked back a pitch. Karza thinks he's winning, and vice versa, and it just keeps going back and forth and back and forth. And finally, Karza realizes, okay, this is going to come out as a draw. I cannot defeat you with this Enigma Force power, but I can blunt your victory. And he decides to go scorched earth and hatches a plan, and he announces that he is going to somehow, through the power of the body banks and through this energy, release what I think he calls a mind shock or world shock or something like that, which is essentially going to obliterate Commander Ron, all these people, and possibly even Homeworld itself. It's like, if I can't win, I'm taking you with me. And just as he's about to drop this bomb, boom, out of nowhere, they don't even show where it's coming from, just this cascade of energy comes down upon him. And just at the critical moment when he's going to unleash this force, he's essentially disembodied as a spirit, knocked out of his armor and into these pits, and just vanishes in a flare of fire. And it's like, wait, what happened? What happened? And they all look up, and the Acroyer fleet has arrived with the world mind, and has basically, at the last moment, with, Karza kind of at a low ebb, has dealt the coup de grace and knocked him off and actually defeated him.
Yeah.
And it ends with his shattered armor just laying out across this bridge over the body banks, just in pieces. And the time travelers say, you did it. Between Commander Ron's fighting with Karza, getting him weakened, getting him off his game a little bit, the Acroyers swoop in, deal the death blow, and almost as suddenly as it began, it's over. And they've won, and Karza is defeated. And as far as they know, that's it. The microverse and Homeworld is finally going to be at peace.
Yeah, and matter of fact, he's lying on the edge of the pit, or that's what it looks like. And all of his armor pieces are just. It's like the doll is sitting on the ground, and someone's just taken it apart and laid it there.
Yeah, except it's kind of an empty shell,
Yeah.
But it is very much reminiscent of how the toy disassembles. Yes,
That's what I thought of when I saw that.
No matter how hard I can try to describe this, I don't feel like I've done it justice.
If people that have read this probably could follow you. people that don't know the story, they must be like,
What?
there's no way they're following this. It's so complicated. It really is. It's not like it's overly. It's not. It's done well. You can read this and follow it, but man, it's a story that's difficult to tell back to somebody and visualize. It's a comic book.
There are so many
It's visual.
moving parts.
Yes, but yes, it's just a lot. And matter of fact, when I was done reading it, I'm like, I would have to go back and really read that again to understand what really has happened, because I'm forgetting stuff already. And
Well, and here's where I kind of have to apologize, because I practically have these comic books memorized.
matter of fact, did you read these to prepare for this today?
Yes, twice.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
On top of me hauling them out of my long boxes and rereading it probably at least once a year for the last
Crazy.
however many
well, no,
years.
I just thought maybe you were able to do it without having touched them.
No, I did go through and reread it all again just to make sure that there were a few subtle points that I wanted to make. But to tell you how much I like this story, we talked about how Micronauts got me back into collecting. Well, they lasted through my entire adult collecting, I'll call it a career for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
Because when it finally came to the point where I was getting out of comics again, I kept very, very, very few of my comics. But some of the ones that I kept were Micronauts 1 through 14. Because even I got rid of my Fantastic Four, I got rid of my Iron Mans, I got rid of my Spider-Mans, and these were comics that I loved and adored. But I kept the Micronauts, and I would reread them periodically just
that
for
makes
the
me
fun of
happy.
it. And the
'Cause
copies.
I wish I felt so good. Like, I wish I could explain to people how happy you seem right now.
Well, the copies that are in that box sitting behind you right now are some of the original ones that I paid my 30 or 40 cents or whatever it was for when I was in junior high school and high school as a kid.
And then you're wondering why I would not take them home and read them. That is why.
Well, they're readers. Hey,
They
they're
are
comics.
not.
They're meant to be read.
They mean something to you beyond the story, right? And I think a lot of the people listening today, they can absolutely identify with that,
Yeah.
right?
Well, but to kind of follow back to what I was saying, I practically have these comic books memorized.
Matter of fact, there was something that you said earlier, and I won't say what it is because I can't entirely remember. You said something almost verbatim to the panel.
I could have quoted a lot of that dialogue.
That's
but
crazy.
tried not to in the interest of brevity. And even at that,
You didn't achieve brevity today, Scott.
Even at that, well, honestly, we never do. We ought to stop. Just at some point, we just need to stop pretending.
I know, but that was just the first issue. We had 11. We had 10 more to go. Like, it's like, no, I'm not criticizing at all. It's a big story, and if
my familiarity with it has led me to running off and leaving you poor listeners in the dust, I apologize. But if nothing else, maybe go get the anthology. Go find these comics and read them, because I think if you read them with an open mind, you'll come away from it as excited about it as I was. And if you've ever just heard of the Micronauts and thought, well, that's just a stupid toy tie-in, why would I want to read that? It's so much more.
Oh, yeah, and it never feels, I can't think of any time where it really feels like that's what no one's trying to sell toys here.
No, it's not a toy commercial. It's not.
As a matter of fact, some people might say that this isn't really even geared towards kids.
It's not. There are some of the body horror and things that we have dealt with. There are some pretty gory dismemberments and, arcane experiments on humans, and it's not.
Well, I just think how many plates are spinning at the same time. That's what I would say. Like, it's just it's not overly complicated, but it's a bit much for your average 10-year-old.
Well, and that
except
may
that
be,
you can look at it and derive what you want from it and get a lot of enjoyment that way. But a lot of words and a lot of stuff happening.
Well, and that may be why they felt the necessity to kind of have that middle bridge area where they're kind of having just general adventures on Earth. A lot of battles, a lot of fights, but also a lot of little ships flying around and fun jokes about
I don't
how being
begrudge them
small.
that. It's just that I like the homeworld stuff so much. I want to know more about that world. I already know about ours. We didn't read any of the issues down the road, but since you read all of them, what's your take on when Broderick becomes the artist?
I really liked I almost said Matthew Broderick. Oh my goodness, Pat Broderick.
It is Pat Broderick.
Pat Broderick, because when Bill Mantlo left after the big finale, he had kind of said, I think he felt he had said his piece, and I believe, was it Howard Chaykin that filled it, that took over after him? And not to throw any shade at Howard Chaykin, but after the spectacular appearance of the last few issues of that story, the artwork kind of took a hit.
Yeah.
And it was not nearly as exciting as it was. And that ran for a handful of issues, even though Michael Golden was still doing some of the covers, because you'd see those great Michael Golden covers and open it up and it's like, oh, no, that's not all that in a bag of chips. But when Pat Broderick came in, that style was revived, and I don't remember what issue it was, but I remember opening it up and going, "Oh wow, they've got a new artist." And he stayed with the book for quite some time.
I won't lie, I actually prefer that over, and that's a compliment to Golden.
Yeah.
I prefer Broderick, and that's what brought me in. This is when I stepped in and started buying the comics. He was the artist at that time, and I really love the homeworld stories back in the microverse stories. Then it just really starts taking off, and the art is just, I can't say enough about it. But this is too much. This is way down the road. This is
yeah, but suffice to say, a good bad guy never stays dead forever. So Karza ends up coming back a few times. Karza actually ends up in cahoots with Hydra. They do come, and through the remaining series, they bounce back and forth between Earth and the microverse
pretty regularly.
Quite a bit. They'll do a spell of a few issues on Earth, then they'll do a spell of a few issues strictly in the microverse, and it just kind of jumps back and forth. But honestly, all of them I thought were pretty excellent.
Yeah, I agree. I really loved. I was just caught up on all that, and it just had a different feel. I always talk about this. I don't think I experience some things like other people do. Like Marvel Comics has a feel to me, and I will always talk about, oh, this artist doesn't feel like Marvel. This writer doesn't feel like Marvel. I don't even know what I mean by that. This title didn't feel like Marvel, but it was so unique to me. Like, I didn't know anything else like it at that time.
It wasn't, even after the initial run of, 11 to 13, 14 issues, depending on how you look at it, it was not afraid to continue with long-form storytelling, because there are times where the Micronauts are having adventures and, going on and doing other things. For instance, they have a run-in with the Fantastic Four, and they do battle with the Psycho Man, who actually also resides in the microverse. The concept of the microverse was actually originated in Fantastic Four. Interestingly enough, they managed to kind of duct tape that together. But in the background, there's always kind of a plot running, and you never quite know where this plot is going, and usually it has something to do with Baron Karza or his cronies in the background pulling strings, trying to, somehow get him resurrected or bring him back from in power. And it's long-form storytelling. It's one of those things that you might not necessarily have to have read the prior 5 issues to understand what's going on, but it's sure going to help.
It's just a lot of fun. I don't love it nearly as much as you do, but that's not a criticism. Like, you are just beside yourself today. Are you happy that you got to talk about Micronauts?
I am so I am happy, and I hope at some point that I didn't melt the brains of everybody who was trying to listening and just shouting at their computer. Will you slow down a little bit?
Oh, you know what? I was impressed by how you could tell it, though. I mean, I'll be honest. Like, you're hitting all the major things. It's just a lot. I joked with you about brevity, but You just can't with it. It is an epic saga. It's huge. It's Star Wars.
I
It's
think
just
from
huge,
the just the pure length of the story, I would say from an issue standpoint, I mean, this is up there with the long form like Phoenix.
Yeah.
Just in the sheer number of issues and all the moving parts and all the plot threads that kind of come together.
To me, this is the most
last
complicated story I think I've read so far for this podcast. And I can't think of anything else that meets it not right off. Phoenix would be the closest thing I could think of.
Yeah.
But I think it outstrips that. There's so many more characters.
More characters, so many plot threads that are kind of happening disparately that all come together at the big finish.
Yeah, they do tie it together.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And I do believe that Bill Mantlo kind of had the overall arc plotted out.
He would have had
ahead of time.
He would have had to have.
Yeah, I don't think that this was kind of a seat of the pants making it up as it goes along. It feels to me like he had a sketch of here's all the plots, here's all the threads. Now some things are going to branch apart, but they all come together at the big finish at the end. And honestly, I don't know that they knew going into it that the comic would be as successful as it was. A lot of the licensed properties and toy tie-ins did not do that well.
Shogun didn't do that well, did it?
Shogun didn't do that well.
ROM did great.
ROM did great, and Micronauts did great, but they both have one thing in common, and that is Bill Mantlo, because Bill Mantlo wrote ROM as well.
Yeah, he was just great for toys.
Yeah, well, he was great for toys, but I think he was great for world building.
Yeah.
He created these mythologies out of thin air, and I think
ROM is like the most boring toy, next to that one Spider-Man toy that was fixed with his arm up all the time.
With his arm up, but it had a string that pulled it up and down and a flashlight in its belt. Yeah, I remember that.
It seemed like a really boring toy to me, but then he was able to create a story around it that was pretty awesome.
Well,
and Micronauts.
And one of the reasons that we chose not to do ROM first is because ROM's story ends up so much bigger, honestly, than the Micronauts ever did. Because if I tell you there's going to be an issue of Fantastic Four where Ben Grimm as the Thing is going to square off against a dire wraith, you just don't think of anything in the Micronauts that carried that much weight. I mean, there were major plot points in ROM that were a multi-comic arc in the Marvel universe. So if you think the Micronaut story was big, ROM's probably going to have to be a two-parter.
It's just a great comic. It's very beautiful all the way around. Yeah.
It is.
I appreciate you twisting my arm today to talk about this.
Always been one of my favorites. And I have one last little thing that I'm going to add. And we'll take a picture of this. And,
let's do that.
And post it on our Blue Sky account. But my copy of issue 11, the title page that I told you I was getting a little choked up just recalling, is actually autographed by Michael Golden in 1985.
That's really cool.
I was at a comic book convention back when comic book conventions were still, little gatherings. They weren't the nationwide phenomenon that they are now. I was at a comic book convention in Indianapolis, sponsored by the Comic Carnival, which was the main comic book store in Indianapolis at the time, and it was called NapCon because Indianapolis has a kind of the nickname of Naptown, as I guess that nothing interesting happens there. But Michael Golden was there, and so was Jim Shooter and Bob Layton. There were a lot of really good people there. But when I saw Bob Layton was there, I went to the rack. I went to the dealer, and because I didn't bring my comics with me, it didn't even occur to me. I went and bought a second copy of number 11 and had him autograph the title page.
I think did you show that to me one day?
Yes, I have shown that to you, but I'll take a picture of that, and we can maybe get a couple of those great splash pages and my autograph and put that on there, and so we can share it with the folks.
I have one last question for you. You started with number 2. How did you get number 1?
At the time, I ordered it from one of the dealers that advertised in the back of the comics.
Oh wow! So you
sent,
did that.
Who was it? Oh gosh, if I flipped through the issue, I could probably Max Seeley. Max Seeley. If you flip through the comic books of that era, Max Seeley always had an ad for back issues. Self-addressed stamped envelope for price list. I ordered it from him.
Oh, cool.
It was the first time I'd ever mail ordered a comic book, and may have been the first time I ever bought, an actual back issue of anything. Okay, well, honestly, that was our highly abbreviated and still way too long view of the Micronauts. As crazy as it sounds, I hope that the people who remember that comic are going to be with me, and they're going to be going, yeah, fist bump. The ones that didn't, I sure hope that maybe my enthusiasm for you has maybe sparked your curiosity a little bit. I really encourage you to go out and give those comics a try. And Tony doesn't know it yet, but next week we're going to kick off our 6-episode series on ROM Space Knight.
We're not, everybody. We're not doing that.
Oh, please. No, we're really not. But we probably could if pressed.
Oh yeah. Well, we might eventually have a 6-part.
Yeah.
We could do 6 parts of ROM easily, just staggered. Over the years. Yeah. So we could do one a year. So.
But actually, I'm not sure what's on the plate for next week. Do you?
That's our new MO. We don't know anymore. We used to want to plan it, and now I edit on the weekends, and
then we just
decide
something out of thin air.
Yeah. We've had people that have told us, they have given us some recommendations. I think we should seriously consider that, just
I agree.
Because it's polite if you're going to write us and ask us to do things.
Well, and I know that some of the topics that have come in have been ones we've discussed previously,
yeah, right.
So not a big stretch.
No, exactly. I think that's exactly how we'll do it. And again, as always, if people want to just write in and give us some ideas about what other episodes you might want to hear, or just comments or anything, we would love to hear from you. If you want to do that, it will be at silvertobronze.25@gmail.com. And I wouldn't say it's active, but we're on Blue Sky, our Blue Sky account, Silver to Bronze on Blue Sky. Just check us out there. Reach out to us from that platform. I check it every day, multiple times. I feel like we're doing pretty well with that.
Yeah. Some people are poking in, saying hi.
Yeah, matter of fact, today we'll probably post those awesome images of your comics, so we'll do that.
I think that'll be fun.
Yeah, we'll do that. Okay, well, if you don't have anything else, Scott, we'll let everybody go.
Other than to just apologize to everybody and say thanks for being tolerant, and thanks for my hyperventilating, and come back next week anyway.
Yeah, it's so much fun watching you have a good time. I just wish I felt about anything that way. I'm too cynical. Okay, well, you guys, everyone just take it easy, and we'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Bye.